Hi, my name is Massimo Re Ferre. I'm a technical product manager with the Cloud Native Application Business Unit at VMware. This is the last shooting of a series that I'm doing around Docker and containers. And this one is about what do we mean by Docker? I mean, every time I talk to a customer, we really need to spend time to level set what they are actually referring to when they use the word Docker. 3 or 4 years ago, when Docker was introduced, it was easy to pin it to a particular technology that would allow you to do a certain and probably limited number of things on top of a single Docker host. Those functionalities and those operations, it was what make Docker become so relevant in the industry. But as time went by, Docker started to do more stuff, and the complexity started to increase in terms of the technology that they were introducing into the market. The other thing that was confusing, and sometimes is still confusing, is this misunderstanding between Docker as an open source project and Docker Inc. as the company behind the open source project. So let's start to kind of draw the history of what happened since the beginning and what is happening right now. One word of caution: what we're going to discuss here in the next 5 minutes or so is more like a vision and where Docker is going in terms of their packaging and open source project. This is not what we're going to discuss, is not already executed, but I thought that I would give you like a vision that Docker has and they have been communicating, because otherwise the video would be obsolete in a matter of days, not even weeks or months. So let's go through the history of what happened. So basically Docker 4 years ago introduced a very small piece of software that revolutionized the industry, so to speak. So they introduced this software called Docker Engine that would allow you to do some very basic but very powerful stuff. So in the previous shooting that I've been doing, I've been discussing about these 4 atomic, very powerful operations that are build, push, pull, and run, that allows you to manage the life cycle of your application. That was typically aimed at solving problems at a small scale, typically on a developer laptop. So there wasn't a lot of moving parts. The problem, quote to quote, so to speak, was when they started to introduce additional and very powerful technology on top of the Docker engine that they have been building since the beginning. So basically what happened is that they started including in this piece of software that they were distributing additional piece of technology that would solve network problems, storage problems, clustering problems, and things like that. So basically what happened is that as they started adding all of these additional components, the artifact of what they were distributing to their customers remained a monolithic piece of software. Right? So you either get everything or nothing. What happened is that the industry started to make a little bit of noise about this, because at that point the ecosystem around Docker was exploding, and it's still exploding, and there are lots of people that are trying to solve some of these problems in a different way. They were, however, hooked into the original Docker engine. So basically what happened is that they were trying to solve some of these problems that I'm picturing here, but they really only needed this part of the technology underneath. But since it was a take all or nothing, they started to being very vocal about being able to only take the pieces that was necessary for them. So long story short, and obviously this was not the only reason, there are other reasons for which Docker started to do what they are starting to doing. But basically what happened is that at this point, Docker started to make all of this setup more modular. And this is exactly what it is happening right now. So basically, they're starting to take some pieces of this. Some of them are very easily identifiable because, for example, this was the clustering part or swarm that was basically a project that they started as Swarm Kit outside of this context. But there were part of this artifact here that was not very modularized, right? So for example, this is where containerd comes into place. So basically, they took some of those very atomic operations that I've been alluding to at the beginning and that I have exploded in some of the previous talk, and they started to modularizing these and extracting those parts. Containerd. And obviously there are a bunch of other things, like for example, libnetwork, that is used to do certain things inside this big artifact. So basically what is happening right now is that up until DockerCon a few weeks ago, there wasn't a very clear definition between the open source project that Docker was working on and the products that Docker was producing and giving to their consumers and to their end users, right? So basically what happened is that this was Docker at the very beginning, and at DockerCon they made an interesting move to rename these as Project Moby. So if you hear about Project Moby, basically Project Moby is an umbrella or a branding name to identify everything that is Docker open source project, right? So not only that, Moby is also a tool to allows you to compose some of this technology into different products. Basically what happens is that Docker is basically using Moby to connect all of these different pieces and produce their artifacts, right? So now there is a clear definition of what it is open source, what it is a community project, and what it is products that Docker, the company, is producing and potentially selling, right? So there are different artifacts that are going to come out from this vision that are, for example, Docker CE or Community Edition and Docker EE or Enterprise Edition. There are some proprietary or known open source components into this version, whereas this is completely open source and free to use. This is coming from what I've been describing before, basically the Moby toolkit that allows Docker, the company, to build these artifacts and potentially add additional stuff to the basic offering. But the idea really about this is to create a line and draw a line between the consumer of the Docker product, Docker CE and Docker EE, for which nothing basically changes, right? So if you used to just consume the technology, downloading the artifacts and installing them on Docker host, nothing really changes. What changes is how the contributor to the open source project or system builders, so either system builders or platform builders and contributors to this part here, this is what changes, right? So if you're a consumer, nothing has changed for you. If you're a system/platform builder or a contributor to this, there is a new way to do things. As I was alluding to at the very beginning, this is more like a vision that Docker is trying to implement, or at least that is what they're communicating. They're trying to implement over time. They are, I would say, halfway through to implement these. But this is actually where they want to do. So a clear separation between the open source part of the game and the consumer or / customer part of the game. This is part of where Docker, the company, is focusing on. This is where Docker, the ecosystem, is focusing on. So hopefully I cleared up some of the confusion that is out there. These are complex topics, but I hope that it is a little bit more clear now. Thanks for watching.